Next project up is doing some built-in cabinets for a landlord, actually. And this is in their master bedroom. They want some more space to store clothes and things. So the original thought, so these doors originally started as just plain shaker style, and then version 2 was doing these sort of sweeping arches, and we have officially landed on more of this cathedral shape. And we're also going to do fluted trim on the sides of the doors, and this is actually going to carry all the way down to the floor. Either side, we're going to have a small bench seat with just a nice round over there, some finished panels on the inside. Excited for another opportunity to make some cabinets. Also, these are going to be big drawers and 2 small drawers. Things are going to look pretty sweet, but follow along. Okay. First place I always start when doing cabinet projects is just breaking down plywood. The easiest way for me to do this is setting down this piece of foam across my table saw and the small outfeed table that I have, and using my track saw to break down a full sheet into half and quarter sheets, which make it simpler to run through my table saw. One thing that I've noticed with this Craig track, and I don't know if it's just me, but the edge of the track is not right where the blade comes down, if that makes sense. So I have to set the track up and I'll lower my blade just to check to make sure I'm on my line. But other than that, it's pretty simple just to cut across. And obviously I don't have any dust collection on it, so I'm trying to figure out the best layout of the shop. I've switched things around a couple times, and so it's still a work in progress. And of course, to help me keep things straight, I just use a TSO track guide to keep things square. And then I'll use this old school fold out ruler just to help me get a little more accurate. I've noticed that the tape on my grizzly saw is off by about 1/8 of an inch, and instead of trying to remember that, I just unfold the ruler and I can get things dialed in pretty well. But this is the second step, is taking the medium sized sheets and breaking them down kind of into their final widths and lengths to make up the cabinet boxes. The part of cabinets that I enjoy is how quickly you can go from cutting a sheet and into assembling a box versus when you're making furniture. You obviously have to go through the milling process, which can be pretty time consuming. As I'm watching myself assemble these, I'm realizing that I probably could have gotten my staple gun out and just tacked these together so I didn't have to fool around with holding these up, trying to reach for things. Also, hopefully in the future, the goal is to build another workbench, maybe one that's a little lower so I don't have to work up so high on cabinets. But yeah, just putting screws in to hold these together, and just put 4 on each side and do that on all the boxes. It makes for a nice simple construction and is also really sturdy. I repeated this process a total of 5 times because I had 3 lower cabinets and 2 upper cabinets. The lower cabinets were pretty straightforward. They're all similar to the size of the one I'm assembling now. And then the 2 upper cabinets were pretty large, so I had to get just a little creative in order to assemble those. Huge win for this project was this is the first cabinet project I had gotten since being in the big shop, and I really benefited from being able to set everything out and dial in the fit of everything. But it was a great start with having the toe kick down and getting it pre-leveled, so then I could just put the cabinet boxes on top of it and make sure that everything fit. Moving on to the upper cabinets, they were all going to get a 1/4-inch panel for the back panel. So there's obviously a million ways that you can do this, but I had an undersized 1/4-inch plywood bit for my router, and so I just got that chucked up and I set the depth 3/4 inch away from the back to accommodate for some stretchers on the back side that I'll use to screw through when installing. But this bit was really accurate, and this made for a quick process. Creates a lot of dust, so probably need to invest in some more dust collection again. Here you can see that 1/4-inch back panel. These were a little unruly. This was the smaller of the 2 upper cabinets, so this one was relatively easy, but it took a little manhandling to get everything into the groove, and then I could just finish up this cabinet by putting on the top/bottom panel. At this point, it was kind of undecided. These are those stretchers that I mentioned earlier. I put 4 of them on just because this cabinet was so tall. Also to help, there was a bow in the plywood, so they kind of were bowing away from each other, the sides were. So these stretchers help bring that back into square, which captured that back panel even better. Here's just a quick example of why that lower worktop or workbench I mentioned earlier would be nice, so I didn't have to try and climb up on top of this to reach the edges to screw these stretchers in. I always tell people that I don't work out for the sake of, right there, that's my deadlift for the week. I probably could have done that a better way, but we got it up there. Here's the carcass for the larger of the 2 upper cabinets. This cabinet ended up being like 55 inches wide. So I did the 4 stretchers going horizontally, and then because I was going to have to put 2 pieces of 1/4-inch plywood in for the back, like you see here, I created a middle stretcher going vertically so that I could nail the 2 pieces of plywood. But This panel gave me some fits because it was bowed just enough, with it being 1/4 inch, that I had to manhandle it a little bit with the mallet, but eventually was able to get everything in and screwed together. This cabinet, I tried to move as little times as possible. One, because I didn't want to cause any damage to it or cause the screws to pull out from the edge of the pieces of plywood. I had a little furniture dolly that I just set the cabinet on and wheeled on over. And instead of trying to deadlift this one up, I just kind of rolled it onto its side up onto the bases. And I only had to do this like 3 or 4 times, but every time it was pretty stressful, to be honest. I waited to nail the back panels together to the cabinet until it was sitting up on its base so that I knew that everything was square. I just used some 23 gauge nails that hid pretty well, and then after that it was time to get the face frame set up. This is actually just trying out a new system of doing a faux face frame, for lack of a better term. This is where the hinges are going to sit, but the face frame you actually see will rest on top of these rails and stiles I'm getting set up. I tried to, instead of save all the sanding till the end, as I got pieces cut and fit before I screwed them together, I sanded everything and put the round over on things, and then after that I just put some pocket holes on the side because the sides of these cabinets were going to be up against the wall and then hidden with a decorative panel. I just used pocket holes to attach everything. I had to pull the diagonals to make sure that it was square. I think one thing I want to try next time is using biscuits, not necessarily for alignment, or maybe for alignment, just setting the face frame down instead of having to guess and check a little bit to make sure everything's in the right spot. I could just rest it on the biscuits that would register for the face frame. Here I am just rounding over the corners of this MDF that's going. These are the decorative panels that are going to go on the side of the upper cabinets just to hide some of those screws. I routed a 1/2 inch deep rabbet on the edge of everything and just nailed that into place, nice and simple. Here you can see what I'm talking about with those decorative panels, just covering up everything and also make it look more finished. The next step in the project was making the cabinet doors, and so earlier I mentioned that there'd be this almost gothic or cathedral shape for the doors, and I made a template out of MDF. This is actually my second attempt, and believe it or not, after talking with my landlord, she wanted these to be less curved, more arched, so I got to troubleshoot not only one time, or the first time and the second time. So then when we got to the third step, I really had everything dialed in. I'm just taking a chisel to clean up that peak, just because I didn't want to couldn't get my router bit in there too closely. Next step was doing a bunch of routing for all the rails and stiles of the cabinet door. Also getting the layout figured out for this MDF. I'd never actually done a curved door like this, so there was a little bit of trial and error. I actually had a 5th door that I tested everything on to figure out the process before I dove head first into the other doors. This, I don't know what was going on, if it was my router bit or if the material. I'm still trying to problem solve my routing setup a little bit, but I just went through and took a 1/4 inch off so that this MDF panel could slide into the 1/4 inch groove I made on the rails and stiles. And the bit didn't take everything off, so I had to go around on the doors and just peel off this little strip of MDF that remained. We're at the part of the project trying to get door hinges set in place. I used basically a story pole, cut to the length that the doors are going to be. The other ones are behind there. And then set the hinges in place. And then what I did, instead of trying to fuss with inset hinges, I tried to cheat the system by using 1/2 inch overlay hinges. So this gap right here is 1/2 inch, so that this will basically mimic that. I'm gonna have to, I don't know if you can see, it's hitting a little bit, so I might have to make that a little bit more of a dramatic round over. But I also had to, on the story pole, I had to put a round over on this side and then cut this at a 20-degree angle. The round over on the front is a little more dramatic. I think it's, I don't even remember, maybe a 1/4 inch round over, so that it will clear this. And then on the back side, that 20-degree cutout will clear this part of the face frame. So these will open. But now I've got these hinges set in place, and I should just be able to transfer the marks from the story pole onto the doors, and those should snap in pretty easy. This was a pretty interesting little problem solving with these drawer fronts being so tall, but the drawers themselves not being as tall, trying to figure out the best way to get those attached. But I used some Celiche soft close undermount drawer slides, and I've had better luck with these than anything Bloom in the past, so been a big fan of these lately, and I was kind of shocked at how well these worked. This was kind of the first go of trying out these big drawers. One of the final steps after getting everything sanded up was adding some of these small embellishments, just some extra decorative pieces to kind of fit the taste of my landlord. I think these were pretty nice little touches. You'll see some more on the drawer fronts and the doors, but yeah, next step was getting set up for paint. I got this Vever inflatable spray booth, and it's been pretty awesome. Funny enough, when I got it, I was like, oh, this is perfect size, and now it feels a little small, especially with some of the doors on this project were really long, and the drawers, that it made it a little challenging to get things in and out, but this inflates pretty darn quick. This is real time. There's 2 little zippers that you have to close, and that traps all the air. Almost trapped me on the side too, but yeah, this tent works super well. I set a little light up in here, 1, just so I can see, but 2, it helps me, it's almost like a raking light, so I can see if there's any debris on anything before I start spraying, so it doesn't get trapped and I don't have to do more sanding. Just use my Graco X17 sprayer to blast some primer on these. Not too complicated of a system. I am definitely new to the world of spraying a lot, and so I'm still trying to figure out my process. But here you can see me laying out lines to get some consistent setup for some more of these embellishments. these decorative pieces. But here we are, spraying another coat. I forgot my mask, and so here's another day with my mask on. We sprayed on some Sherwin-Williams emerald urethane. The color was Adrift, this nice light blue color. Went on really smooth. I'm pretty confident about it because it was probably my best paint job I've done so far. So here's install day. It's a carpet cut out. I got the platform leveled, and then I could just go through the process that I did in the shop, getting everything set up piece by piece, doing the decorative panels, the face frame, got the doors put in and the drawer fronts, and the final step was installing this 7.5-inch crown molding that really made these cabinets feel like they stretched the room. So even though the ceilings were like 8 feet tall, it definitely made it feel like it was like 9 feet or higher. But here you can see a better look at some of those embellishments on the drawers and doors. Client hadn't picked out hardware yet for drawer pulls, so we're just going to leave that for later. But here, kind of the final shot. It's got some extra shelves in here for storage, some rods to hang clothes. Yeah, here's a close look at all of those decorative pieces and some of that fluted trim I mentioned back at the very beginning. But yeah, I felt really good about this project. Looking forward to doing more cabinets.